Hi folks, GamerbugUK here again, and it's time for another Retro Transformers video. And today I'm going to be doing another tier list where I rate the box art of the original G1 Transformer toys. I did two videos previous to this where I rated the 1984 and the 1985 toys, and unsurprisingly today we're going to be rating the 1986 toys. I'm going to jump in quite quickly rather than going over the ins and outs of why I'm doing this, because if you watch one of the other videos, it's already on there. And if you don't, well, you can just watch this video as a standalone and enjoy it as is. What I will do is let's go on and discuss the actual ratings. Rating 1, the S-Class. The top of the tree is badass. This is just an amazing picture that evokes some real cool feelings, and it just looks cool. It just looks awesome. There is pretty much nothing wrong with this, and it's kind of the cream of the crop. Underneath that, there's almost there, but this is something that gets that feeling of badass, but there's something a little bit wrong with it. There's something that puts it off being able to be in that top tier. It's nothing huge, because if it was huge, it probably wouldn't be there, but it's something that just means it misses out. Then you have the middle of the road. They tried, they showed up, they participated, it's fine, whatever you wanted to call it. Basically, this is it doesn't do anything terribly wrong, it doesn't do anything terribly right. It's actually just okay. It's just fine. It doesn't, offend, and it doesn't overly elate. This is par for the course. Below this we have Uncanny Valley, or Meh. This is a dual combo of either something that's so freaky and so weird looking that it belongs in here because nothing like this should exist, or it's not quite. It's fine, it's actually underfine. It's kind of just like, bleh. You can't even have an opinion of it. It's that uninteresting. Or it's not terrible trash, but it's pretty bad. So that's where everything goes into. I didn't want to do 6 categories, so that's why it's jumbled together. And finally, we have ass and bad, the antithesis to badass. This is just a load of tosh, and it's just garbage. Nothing you want to nothing about this would inspire you to go and buy that toy. It's really naff. With that out of the way, we can actually get on with the video. So we're going to jump straight in, and starting with Air Raid. This picture is fine. I will say that I have certain biases when it comes to these, and if it's something I really wanted as a kid, was really into as a kid, then it will probably, get some plus points towards it. The aerial bots were not that. They were, yeah, sure, if somebody got them for me, I would have been happy, but I wasn't really desperate to get my hands on the aerial bots. And so they don't have any real nostalgic love. That said, this is an okay picture. I don't dislike this. I found they all blurred into one another, and this is the first one. So I think this is actually just very middle of the road. There is one problem with the picture that I can spot that really sticks out, apart from the fact the legs are too short, and that is that his thigh is actually in front of his hip. I don't know where it's actually extending from. But beyond that, there's nothing really bothers me about this picture. It looks cool enough. I think the whole upper torso is absolutely fine, just the legs are a bit short. So for a start one, I think Air Raid here can definitely go into They Tried. Blades. Now the Protector bots were some Transformers I wanted, because I was a young kid and these were all like emergency vehicles, and they were cool, and Defensor was cool, and I felt of them being really heroic and everything. So this gets plus points for me actually wanting them as a toy. Unfortunately, that does nothing to stop the fact that this is a really, really awful picture. This just looks like garbage. I don't like anything about this. I don't get the tiny little thigh. The face looks creepy and weird, but not uncanny, just kind of naff, like someone's painted a face blue for no reason whatsoever. It doesn't even feel like it matches or belongs on the actual character. The arms, yes, they're probably toy accurate, but look stupid. This is just a garbage picture, which is a shame. Like I say, I like the Protector bots, but I'm afraid Blades goes into ass and bad. Blast Off. Another combiner, one of the Combaticons. and another one of the teams that I really wanted as a kid. I liked tanks and planes and helicopters and military stuff, so why wouldn't I want this? And to be fair, this is the one I liked the least because it was a space shuttle and it didn't make too much sense to me. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with this, and actually the picture's kind of cool, and he looks kind of cool, and I don't have any massive issues at all here. So with it being the least interesting of the Combaticons, I like this picture. I think it looks cool. I don't think it's absolutely badass, and I think this can probably go into almost their butt, because it does look good. Blur, the first of the movie characters. And I was not a fan of the movie, and I was certainly not a big fan of the new characters introduced, with a few exceptions. This was not one of the exceptions. This was an absolutely annoying character. And although this does not look like the cartoon character, which did look better than this looks pretty naff. It looks kind of creepy. It looks weird. I wouldn't say it's terrible. I'd say if you took the head off it, the rest of it is sort of okay. But the head is really weird. He looks like he's wearing what I can only describe as a kind of a barrister's wig. And then he's got a sort of weird, puffy old man face. And there's not a lot to like about this. I'm going to have to put this in Uncanny Valley because of the head. The body doesn't offend me, but the character does. So Uncanny Valley for Blur. Brawl, another Combaticon, another character that I wanted. And a friend of mine actually had this. I don't know anyone who had all the Combaticons. He had this, and that was it. And it was a cool toy, and I really liked it. And if I'm honest, this is a cool picture, and I really like it. Is it badass? No, I think it's not quite there, but it's pretty damned close. I really like this picture a lot, and it does help that I like the character. There's no egregious problems with this. If anything, he looks a little bit, and this is a weird thing to notice, chesty, busty. But beyond that, I like this. And so Brawl is going to go into almost there, but. Breakdown, the first of the Stunticon combiners. And the Stunticons were characters I wasn't that fussed about. They were just more cars, and I kind of like the fact that the Autobots were cars and the Decepticons were other things. So, and these were like Lamborghinis and Ferraris and stuff, and it was like we already had them, so they weren't that exciting to me. That said, this is a particularly trash picture. This looks kind of awful, not uncanny, just awful. It looks weird, skinny, flat. The face looks like a human's face with eyes that are on fire, and the redness of it is odd. And then the weird fist bump it's going for and stuff. I don't like this picture at all. I think it's better than the picture of Blades, but I think it's a crap picture. And so for that reason, Breakdown goes into ass and bad. Broadside. Well, this one was never going to go well, was it? Broadside was one of those characters that was a stupid idea. Trying to get something that's a plane, in very inverted commas, that turns into an aircraft carrier was never going to work, was it? And I don't know a version of this that's ever worked. They all look rubbish. The plane looks rubbish, or obviously the aircraft carrier is too small, the robot's not great. This picture just goes along that lines. It's kind of a failed experiment. It looks like he's got a big gem rather than a cockpit on his chest. He looks like he's wearing parachute pants, like MC Hammer pants, and the head just looks kind of odd. It actually doesn't look like it belongs on this character. It's not terrible, it's just not good. And I think for that reason it's gonna go into meh rather than ass and bad, as it doesn't wholeheartedly offend me. It's just kind of pfft. So yeah, meh. Bruticus, the first of the combiners, and I quite like this picture. I think it does a pretty damn good job of showing off Bruticus. It doesn't look too weird. It looks kind of cool, if I'm honest. I think that Swindle looks a bit boxy on the leg, but if I had one other gripe, and I guess this is tricky to do on a singular image, it doesn't convey the sort of mass and size of Bruticus. This is meant to be a very tall combining robot, and it doesn't look like that. It just looks like a robot. But it looks cool. And for that reason, I think if it somehow felt like it was a full size, this one might go into badass. And I might do some jiggling around at the end, but for now, this definitely goes into almost there, but. Cyclonus. And I do not remember this picture whatsoever as a kid. And this is horrendous. This is the creepiest looking thing. From the neck down, there's nothing massively wrong with this. Maybe the wings look a little bit weird and how he's holding the gun. But beyond that, nothing massively wrong. From the neck upwards, this is absolute creepiness. The face is frightening. Its helmet that looks like it's wearing another helmet is weird. Ironically, I think this might have looked cooler if it didn't have the blue and light blue helmet bit sticking out the top. And I know that is sort of part of him, but it looks just garbage here. But you can't get past that really creepy, uncanny face, can you? So I'm afraid this has to go into Uncanny Valley, and I'm going to put it... I think because this is uncanny, it's going to go in front of Broadside because one's meh and one's uncanny. So yeah, Uncanny Valley, definitely. Dead End, the next of the Stunticons, and I kind of like this a lot more than I liked Breakdown. It's not doing anything totally wrong. There are a couple of issues I have with this, but the face isn't too weirdly human. It still looks robotic. The eyes are soulless, but that's fine. The two issues I really have with this, I guess, are the gun being so thin and weird looking, but it's not the end of the world. And it's the fact that one of his arms is bent at the elbow and the other one doesn't have an elbow, nor could it have an elbow, which means his arms are mismatched. But actually, it's a pretty decent picture. I don't dislike this, and I think this actually belongs in They Tried. So yeah, that's where this is going to go. Defensor. This was probably tied for my favourite of the combiners. And I have to say, nostalgia and bias is probably playing a big part, but this looks awesome. This looks really, really cool. Way better than the toy actually did. Now, I was never a big fan of the motorbike part of this, and we'll get onto that later. But actually, this whole thing looks great. He looks like a unit. He actually looks like he's got size behind him. The guns, the pose, everything. This looks cool. And yeah, there's some bias behind that, but I think Defensor is going to be our first badass. Dive Bomb. Now, the Predacons were not characters I was particularly interested in for the reason that I didn't care too much for animals that turned into robots, or robotic animals, even more so, that turned into robots. I wasn't, in some ways I wasn't that into the Dinobots, but the Dinobots at least were dinosaurs, and the cartoon did a good job of giving them some character, whatever that may have been. This just wasn't anything I was that bothered about. But I have to say, I actually like the picture. Now I'm seeing it, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty damned cool. I can only see one thing wrong with this picture, and that's the weird sword. It looks like a tiny little fake toy dagger rather than a sword. But beyond that, I like everything about this picture. So for that reason, I am going to put it in almost there, but it's a very close run thing, but I think it goes in there for definite. Dragstrip. I don't hate this picture, but I don't think this does a lot for him either. I'm thinking about the most recent Legacy figure, and it's way cooler than this. I would say this is fine. This is the way I would describe this. The face isn't too uncanny, although it feels wrong, but beyond that, it's fine. There's nothing terribly wrong with it, but it certainly doesn't evoke any wonder in me either. So I think for that very reason, it just goes to the bottom of They Tried. Eject. Now, I rated Soundwave tapes in the original video I did, the 1984 one, and most of them came out as badass or thereabouts. Blaster, on the other hand, looks like he's failed miserably here. This is a very, very weird looking robot. If you were to just have the legs and the body, not too much of a problem. But then he's got what I would call very creepy looking hands and cuffs that are massive. And then the gun is huge. But the weirdest thing about this is, though I'm fairly sure the eye slit that's red on this is actually the eyes, it actually looks like the two black shadows on the kind of orange T-shape are his eyes. The line going down is his nose, and his mouth is just hidden from view. And not only does that make him look kind of Viking helmet wearing, it makes him look like he's shy. And I can't get that vision out of my head as much as I try. And that makes him extremely uncanny. So for eject here, we're going into Uncanny Valley. Firefight. This is kind of what I meant about the aerial bots all bleeding into one, because I'm trying to think back at what the different air raid looked to Firefight. From the waist up, there's nothing wrong, nothing egregious about this at all. The hands are too big. That's a very common thing in all these pictures. Not worried about that. And his gun looks a bit like it's on the droop. The weirdest thing about this is the fact he kind of looks like he's wearing a miniskirt and his legs are missing. But beyond that, there's nothing terribly wrong here. It's just kind of weird. And for that reason, I don't think this can go into They Try, because I feel there's too much wrong with that whole bottom half of him. But the upper half is actually pretty good. So I'm going to put him into Uncanny Valley and Mare. I'm not sure what one he actually belongs in with that. But he is weird looking. So yeah. First Aid, the second of the Protector bots. I really kind of like this toy when I was a kid. I liked the look of it. It was an ambulance, so I wanted it. And I like this picture, except the problem I have with it is the head. Why does the head look like a skull wearing a crown? For an ambulance, that feels dark and weird and creepy. You know, it's like, I'm here to save you, Skullface says. I'm like, yeah. That's really uncanny and really creepy. And like I say, it feels like, maybe it's just my interpretation and maybe I need help. But it feels almost dark and twisted. And for that reason, this goes definitely into the Uncanny Valley. Galvatron. Now, I was not a fan particularly of Galvatron, but he didn't offend me either when it came to the movie. Of course, he was not Megatron. And that was a downside, because I wanted Megatron. That said, I thought the toy was absolute trash and looked awful. Didn't have it, just remember seeing it. But this picture, I really like this picture. This is a really, really good picture, and it makes him look menacing and awesome. If I were to pick a problem, I don't think it's a massive problem. I think it's just personal preference. It's the face. The face doesn't quite look that snarky, smirky, what I remember Galvatron looking. Same as Megatron, really. But that's a nitpick. That's a tiny nitpick, and I don't think it's enough to not have Galvatron go into badass. No. So I don't recall much about the Sharkticon toys when I was a kid, but I do have 2 Studio Series Sharkticon toys, and just the toys alone look better than this picture, which looks like a Hobbit cosplaying as a robot. It's really kind of odd looking. I don't think it's uncanny, actually. I just think it looks kind of rubbish. The head, I don't know, kind of looks too human for my liking, which is weird because it's very angular. The whole thing looks squat. The shark teeth and face doesn't really do it for me. And he looks like he's presenting his mace lollipop to us, which looks like it's one solid piece rather than a sort of loose whip part with the mace bit on the end. I don't like this picture at all. I think it's kind of rubbish. I think it's probably better than some of the others that are already ass and bad, but I don't like it. And I think it is ass and bad. Groove, another Protector bot. And I'm honest, I mentioned this earlier, but this was the least interesting Protector bot to me. It was a strange scale thing when it came to toys. I recall having plenty of toys that had a motorbike included in a set. Might be, I think I had a police car set that had a police motorbike included. And the police motorbike, like this, was the same size as the car, if not bigger. And I just didn't like that. I knew, I may have been like 10 or whatever, but I knew that that's not how things work. And this was one of those things. Why would you have a motorbike as a leg the same size as, I think, an ambulance? So I didn't like this about the toy. That said, if the picture was good, does that matter? And no, but this picture is not good. This picture is somewhere between uncanny and just not very good at all. The fact that he looks like he couldn't move whatsoever. Yes, I know the toy would have been like that, but this is a picture to show it off. His very, very weird golden old man hook-nosed face, and then his, what I'm only going to describe as penis wheel, means that this is just a pretty bad picture. Considering I like the protector bots so much, they're not doing very well, are they? I think this definitely belongs in ass and bad. I think maybe it's a little bit more interesting than Blades, but only just. Headstrong. Another Predacon. This one, Rhino I'm going with, and I don't like this picture particularly because it actually looks like he's wearing a kind of bobble hat, sort of. I guess the way to describe this is it invokes Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs looks to me. He looks stunted. He looks like he's wearing a hat that should have a bobble on the back of it. And his head's too big for his body. And then he's still showing us his very proud, massive dagger thing. I don't think this is a good picture. I don't think it's uncanny. I just don't think it's a very good picture. If everything was stretched out, it would do it a lot of justice. But it's not stretched out. And so I actually think this is it meh or is it ass? I think it's ass, but I think it goes to the top. Hot Rod, the young whippersnapper usurper to the throne of Optimus Prime. That, we all know what happens if you've watched the movie. And I didn't mind Hot Rod as a character in the movie, and I don't mind. I really like actually the Studio Series figure of him that I have, and I like this picture. I think it's a really good picture, except one thing. And if it wasn't for this one thing, I actually think I'd put this into badass, but it stops it going in there. And the one thing is his face. Instead of looking like that young, cocky, carefree Hot Rod, this looks like a very, very concerned middle-aged man. And I don't think that's a good look. But nothing else about this bothers me. Everything else about this looks good. So for that reason, I think he definitely goes into almost there, and I think I prefer him just slightly due to the fact I like the character a bit more than Divebomb. Hotspot, the leader of the Protector bots, and a fire engine, so that was going to go well for me wanting this character, wasn't it? Again, never got them, it's a shame, but I'm not a massive fan of this picture, but I don't hate it. I think it's trying, and I just think it gets a few things wrong. It feels like it should be stretched. Other than that, I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong with this at all. I was never a fan of the fact that Hotshot was blue, but I get it because of Inferno, and Inferno was a better character. But all in all, it's fine. The pose is good, the sort of what they're going for is good, but it just feels a bit squat, and I think that could have done with being sorted out. That said, I quite like the picture, so I think this is going to go into They Tried, and I think it's going to go here. Hubcap. If you watch my 1984 video, you can see my opinion on what I think of Bumblebee and Cliffjumper. And this ain't Bumblebee, and this ain't Cliffjumper, this is Knockoff Man. And that alone means this is worse straight away. But to add it to that, it has all the problems of the Cliffjumper picture, which was frightening, and it also adds in a horrendous face that looks like he's actually got two mouths rather than a top and bottom set lips. And that is even more frightening. Add to that the kind of bug eyes, and this is just horrifying. That said, it's not uncanny, it's just crap. And so it goes to the bottom of the pile of ass and bad. Cop. I don't like Cup. I've never liked Cup. He's a boring character that turned into a boring alt mode, and he's boring. That said, I've got to rate this upon the picture. And the picture is all right, I guess. There's something about it, unfortunately, that is uncanny, though. And it's very uncanny. And it's the fact that he looks like he's got someone else's head sticking up on a pole from his body. And that creeps me out every time I see it. It's like you imagine that there's just this big pole going down with a head on top of it, and it goes all the way through the body. And the gaps each side, and it looks like there are gaps each side to me, creep me out. So for that reason, he is uncanny, and he goes into Uncanny Valley. There is nothing really else wrong with this picture, so I think he's probably going to go high in Uncanny Valley, but Uncanny Valley nonetheless. Menasor. This was a combiner I wasn't that fussed about, but I do have the most recent legacy version of him, which is pretty damned good. Not perfect, not by a long shot, there are problems with it, but this looks pretty good actually. I have a couple of issues with it, but it definitely gets that feeling of scale right because of the fact that the legs look like cars, so if they're cars, he must thus be big. The issues I've got really are twofold, with a slight third. One, the gun looks weird and wrong, and why would you... It looks like it's just going to keep tipping forward at any moment. Two, why is Menasor's arm not attached to dragstrip? Don't know. And three, his face is just a little bit weird. But he does look cool, and the arm not being attached I don't really hold much truck with. The gun being wrong isn't really a problem, so he's got a slightly odd face. So I think this one definitely goes into almost there, but so yeah, let's pop him in there. Metroplex, the Autobot City, the Colossus. I had a friend that had this and I was so jealous of it. I loved going around his house and playing with this toy, and he wasn't even in that into Transformers, so it annoyed me even more. This picture, does it do it justice? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. If you stop looking at the picture just on his upper thighs, yes. But then it screws the pooch as soon as it hits that point, because his lower thigh, his knee and his upper shin all appear to be missing. Thus he goes from his upper thigh to his shin and his foot, making him, instead of a Colossus, look like a colossal weirdo. And for that reason, this immediately has to go into Uncanny Valley. It is a crying shame, because if they just made the legs the right size, I think this would have been in badass. But there's entirely too much wrong with it, making an Autobot City a giant look like a dwarf not a good idea. So Uncanny Valley, you go into, my son. Motormaster, the leader of the Stunticons. And this is awful. This is absolutely awful. Now, I don't recall the toy, so I'm going to go with the toy probably looked this bad. But this is terrible. It looks like a very constipated purple-faced Marvel villain wearing a robot suit made out of boxes that is got very short legs and is got some special roller skates that are looking like trucks. This is absolute crap. This is the worst picture I've seen so far, and it does this character so dirty. The legacy version of this character is phenomenal, and this ain't it. This is ass. This is bad. This is trash. Octane, Triple Changer. Not one of those characters I knew much about. I don't recall the toy particularly, but I can say one thing about this. It evokes nothing from me. I don't think anything about this is cool, but I can see it's not specifically doing anything wrong. But it is literally, I look at it and I just go, yeah, sure, but meh. And that's not a good thing, is it? I can see one thing actually that this does wrong, and I guess this was always going to be a problem with another Triple Changer that trains from a tanker into a jumbo jet. The wheels are too small, and it just looks weird. But there's nothing about this interesting whatsoever, and it is very much meh. So he's going to meet his friend Broadside in meh. Onslaught, the leader of the Combaticons, and probably the least interesting of the Combaticons to me because I didn't think the alt mode was that exciting. I get they needed to come up with something a bit bigger, so why they went for what they went for. But that said, the picture is absolutely fine. I think the arm looks a little bit too squat on one side. But I don't have any issues with this. Does he look cool? No. The other two have done it better that I've seen so far. But is there anything wrong with this? No, it's perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable, and he definitely belongs in They Tried. Outback. Now, I liked Outback. He was a kind of cool enough character for me because he was like Brawn. A friend of mine had I think these were the third wave of mini Autobots, and I liked this one a fair bit. The picture-wise, this does more right than wrong compared to Brawn, and that's a great thing, but it does one thing wrong that really annoys me, and that's the head. The head kind of looks like a weird version of Juggernaut or something from the X-Men, or I don't know, or Ram Man from He-Man. He looks like his head's been squashed, and if they'd have just maybe squeezed it from the side a bit as well so it was slimmer, I think I would have liked this more. But all in all, it's actually pretty good, and I do like it. And the head is the butt, and I don't think it's a big enough butt, this all sounds very weird, to put him into They Tried, because I think it's better than They Tried. But I think he has to go to the bottom of Almost There. Pipes. This is a weird picture, and yet I don't know why I already like it. I think the only thing I find wrong about this picture, because I find it quite enduring and almost cute, is the head. And the way the head is makes it almost cuter because he looks like he's hiding. It feels like half his face is missing and he's buried his head into his own chest. But the rest of it, I actually like this picture. I don't know if he's almost there. I think actually if the head was, like I say, it feels like it's not extended out properly, it probably would be almost there. So is that enough to put him at the bottom of Almost There? But you know what? I think it is. Predaking, the combined formation of the Predacons, and I don't really remember anything about this as a kid. That said, as I didn't really care for the Predacons, I like this. I like this a lot. This looks pretty damn badass. This looks really cool. I am assuming it's fairly faithful. The feet do look a little bit odd, and fair enough. But if that's what they look like, that's what they look like. I can only find one thing I don't like about this and one thing wrong with this. The thing wrong is the way the sword's being held. That should be straighter, I'm pretty sure of that. And also it's a bit too small. And then the only thing I don't particularly like, for want of a better word, is the kind of little, looks like he's got a smiley face on his mask. And if that wasn't there, or if it was just red, I think that would have looked better. But all in all, this is badass. I like this a lot. So it's going into badass. Ramhorn. Oh my god. This is... What is going on with this picture? This looks like the most nervous rhinoceros I have seen in my life. Everything that is wrong with this is pretty much located in the head. The weird eye and the mouth make this just look like a robot that's going, oh, like something's worrying it. And it doesn't help with the way that the feet are kind of like very daintily tipped back, like they couldn't support this character at all. This is actually almost, I would say this is funny, but because I don't have hilarious as a category, I guess he goes into uncanny because of that head. It endears me, but that's probably not a good thing because it just means I think it's hilarious rather than a serious robot. So yeah, this definitely goes into Uncanny Valley. Rampage. I would say so far of all the Predacons I've seen, this is the most just like, meh, it's fine sort of look. I don't like the way that I think it's a panther. I don't really know what this character was. The panther's head going into his chest looks a bit too moulded in and looks a little creepy. The pose is fine. The helmet's okay. Very Metroid looking. The gun's not great, but there's nothing wrong with this, really. It creeps me out a little bit, like I say, the panther head. The sword's actually the right size and looks like a decent sword for once. The pose is all right. The little back leg looks a bit too small. But I actually think this fits perfectly into They Tried, but I don't think I can put any higher than that. Ratbat. God. This is another one. What is going on with this? Now, I'm going to describe what I am seeing here. I am seeing what I'm going to describe as a very hench torso with very hench arms that end in hooks, with what I'm going to describe as a dog head or potentially kangaroo head with big ears on it. And then the lower half of the torso, on the body, sorry, the legs is just missing, like it's been chopped off. That is not what Ratbat is. I know exactly what Ratbat looks like. I have 2 copies of Ratbat, a third party and a Siege version. And he looks a billion times better than this. This is absolute trash. I don't even think this can go into uncanny, or can it, because it's so weird? Maybe. It's a really bad picture. It's a really bad drawing, and I think it's not uncanny because you feel like they've just got everything wrong rather than they were trying to do something right and it didn't happen. So I think this has to go into ass and bad. Razorclaw. Was this guy the leader of the Predacons? Let me know in the comments, because I don't know because I know enough about them. I really like this picture though. I really like the look. The character looks cool. I have one slight issue with this, and I don't know if it's enough to keep him out of badass. And that's, I think he's meant to be a lion, but the head looks like a Chinese dragon, not a lion. So it's like they couldn't remember what a lion's meant to look like. That's it. That's all I don't like about this. This looks pretty damned cool all the way through. And I think maybe that's not a good enough reason to not have him in badass, so I think he goes into badass. Rewind. This character has all the same problems Eject has. The torso and the legs look fine. The arms look like he's got giant big poofy cuffs that he's wearing, and then he's got tiny little hands. And then the massive gun, and exactly the same issue with the head. It looks like somebody's wearing a helmet, and then they've got a headband on, and then they've got their little dark eyes, the long nose, and their head. The rest of their face is being hidden inside their chest. I think it's a better picture, just than Eject, but it fits in exactly the same place. It's weird and it's uncanny, and it's not meant to look like that. So Uncanny Valley, you go. Rodimus Prime, the replacement for Optimus Prime, or at least they thought it was going to be. And not a character I have any interest in. I didn't think wow when I remember seeing him in the cartoon, and I'm even not that enamored with him to this day. That said, this is a really, really crap picture. This is just tat. This is meant to be the new hero of the Autobots, and what you've gone for is what I'm going to describe as potentially an old man's face with bags under his eyes that almost has a kind of racist Chinese look to it, and then looks like he's potentially wearing a swimming cap. He also looks a little bit like a rip-off of Ming the Merciless, and that's not helped with his giant spiky like lapel thing sticking from the back of his back. And then the weird curved bits for his wheels on his arms looks like he's almost got a shell, and then the pose is rubbish. So for a character I was never going to like, this is an absolutely trash picture. I have the Kingdom version of Rodimus Prime, which apart from his face, which is also an abomination, is actually quite cool if you take away the fact that he's got a Winnebago, which has always been stupid. I don't like this. This goes into ass and bad. Runabout. One of the... were these called battle chargers? Yeah, the jump starters were the Autobots, weren't they? So these were battle chargers. And they were a pretty naff and dumb toy. A friend had them and I didn't really think much of them. And this does nothing to change my mind. This is a really, really crap picture. But it does look like the toy, I have to say. So I'm going to give it that, but it is still a crap picture. They've done nothing to embellish this to make it look better. It looks just as bad as the toy. And the face looks like a, I don't know, kind of a stormtrooper looking dog face. It's not good, is it? There's nothing about this that is even remotely good, and I can't even call it uncanny. This is just kind of trash. I will say that the Earthrise versions of these were really good. Alt mode not so much, but there was a tolerance issue in that. But forgetting that, the actual robots look brilliant. This, however, ain't it. Ass and bad. Runamuck. You can't have Runabout without Runamuck. And you can't have one crap picture without another crap picture, it seems, because this is just as garbage as the other one. I mean, it's the same picture pretty much, just slightly different. His hand's open and the head is different. So instead of looking like a stormtrooper dog face, it now looks like a kind of Frankenstein or mummy look to the face with the weird glowy eyes. And it looks like the line is the mouth and then a massive chin. This is just also pretty crap and belongs in ass and bad. Sandstorm. Now, Sandstorm was a character that I recently got in the Legacy Collection, and it's a really, really good figure. I really like it. Probably the best triple changer that they've done. And I'm going to say, I really also like this picture. This is a good picture. I can see one or two niggles about it. The problem with the thighs and how they're sort of, orientated and stuff. And I'm not too sure about his face. It looks like his face, not his helmet, but his face doesn't quite go with the picture. But honestly, they're so minor niggles. I like this picture a lot, and he looks really cool. So I think this can definitely go into badass. So yeah, well done, Sandstorm. Scourge. Well, I thought that Cyclonus was bad. This definitely takes the cake out of those two. This is absolute trash. Let's ignore the fact that he has weird spindly legs that are for some reason not even in a colour that matches them in any way, shape or form. Let's ignore the fact that they've decided, you know what would look good? Him in either A, a Superman pose, or B, shaking his fist angrily. And then to add to that, let's add on a massive face. Not even necessarily a massive head. I mean, it is, but it looks like a massive face. A massive face of an old person who's sad and looks very angry, but at the same time unhappy. And all the nuances and coolness of Scourge's face, yeah, let's not bother with them. Let's just throw this in there, this horrific ghostly apparition. This is absolute trash, and it belongs in the trash. And I have to say it's worse than Motormaster. Silverbolt, the leader of the aerial bots, and you wouldn't think it, would you, looking at this picture? This is just boring. I mean, really, really boring. Everything about this is boring. If somebody said to me, that's a plane, I'd go, no, it's not. And maybe that's what Silverbolt looked like. I don't really recall. But it doesn't help by his odd Chris Griffin face. But no, this just doesn't do it for me. This is absolutely dull as dishwater. And goes into meh for that very reason. Skylynx. Well, he wouldn't be happy with this picture, would he? There is nothing phenomenal or wonderful about this. This is not very good at all. I think the only thing I like about this is they've done the head justice. But then how it looks like it's on the neck looks kind of wrong. The way they've highlighted kind of parts of the red make it look like actual shiny plastic on a drawing, which is strange. The wings are too small. The tail's sort of alright, I guess. And then the legs are too stumpy and stubby. Feels like they've completely missed the Lynx part of Skylynx here and gone Sky Stumpy Short Pig potentially. Nah, not liking this whatsoever. I don't think it's uncanny or meh. I just think it's a bad picture. Skydive. another aerial bot, and I don't mind this one actually. It looks okay. It's a fairly dynamic pose. Yeah, it's got the giant hands that they all have. The weird double barrel guns, interesting. The face looks good. The proportions aren't too bad. I like this. I like this a fair bit. I wouldn't say it's almost their butt, but I definitely think it belongs in They Tried, and I think out of the aerial bots, it's the best one I've seen so far. So yeah, let's put him into They Tried. Slingshot. Does Slingshot actually look like this? Did the G1 toy actually look like this? I know they're redoing the aerial bots, and it frightens me if this is what he actually looks like. Does he actually look like a basketball-headed Millhouse? I don't know. That is absolutely frightening nightmare fuel stuff. And then he looks like he's got that kind of wraparound haircut when you've gone bald. And yeah, not good. The rest of him is literally as average as you like. Nothing exciting there whatsoever. So I guess they just didn't, well, let's make him exciting by adding on a absolutely fear-inducing head. And for that, my friend, you are going straight into the Uncanny Valley. Springer. Does this look like Springer? I don't think this looks like Springer. This looks like a green alien that would not look out of place in a Marvel comic, wearing a pair of green trousers, some sort of metallic silver boots, very thigh-high ones maybe. Springer. Does this look like Springer? I don't think this looks like Springer. This looks like it's been drawn by somebody who was drawing a green alien bad guy maybe for Marvel Comics. And they went, well, he can be wearing green trousers, nice tight green trousers, and he can be wearing some knee-high boots. And then he's kind of got a robot-like exoskeleton upper body thing going on. And then we'll put a helmet on him. It really invokes that kind of feeling, or maybe even a Flash Gordon sort of feeling or something. Or maybe I'm thinking of like Dan Dare. I don't know. It's not a bad picture. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the picture. I think it's fine, and I think for that reason it goes into They Tried, but it just doesn't feel like Springer. So though it is a good picture with no fundamental problems, I don't think it looks like Springer or does a good job of portraying Springer. But I think it goes into They Tried, but probably at the bottom. Steeljaw. I like this picture. I like this picture a lot. I think one thing puts me off on this picture, and it's really easily solved, but because it's there, it kind of just throws me a bit every time I look at it. And that is the eye. The fact that instead of making perhaps the whole eye red, they've kind of gone, let's give him more of a pupil in the middle of his eye that's red. And it kind of almost looks like he's wearing spectacles. It's just adds a tiny little uncanniness. Not Uncanny Valley levels of uncanniness, because it's still a really good picture and he looks really cool. And I think if you coloured that entire eye in red, rather than just having the yellow bit on the outside of it, he'd be absolutely cool and badass. And I think I'm going to put him into badass at the bottom, because I don't think it's enough to put me off. But it is just a little thing that throws me a bit. This also looks way better than the, I think, is it a Studio Series or Legacy toy that's coming out that looks kind of rubbish, but I know I'm going to have to buy it because it's part of the collection. Anyway, ignoring that, badass. Streetwise. This should have been a slam dunk because it's a police car and it was a protector bot, and I think I wanted it as a kid, and this isn't very good. This is another protector bot that seems to have been hit by looking like a load of trash. And it doesn't look like a police car to me. If it wasn't for the like a sheriff symbol on the side, I wouldn't even know that. For some reason, he's got an odd ab crunch going on where underneath his windscreen chest, the legs look wrong. There's nothing about this picture that's interesting, and it all looks a little bit just phoned in. And I think it goes into ass and bad. Superion, the combined formation of the aerial bots. And I don't hate this. I don't hate this at all. I only dislike one thing about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, please do tell me in the comments, but I'm sure that Superior had a face plate over it instead of having a mouth. I might be remembering wrong, so do let me know. And if he did have the faceplate that I think he had, that would make this perfect and really cool. But because he doesn't, it kind of throws me a bit. Is it enough to drop it out of badass? No, I think I'm being harsh if it does. But it would have definitely elevated it a bit higher. So I think he's got to go to the bottom of badass, but he is badass. Swerve. Now, I was torn on the Gears artwork and then kind of figured out that I really did actually like it. So you think this would be an absolute shoo-in to do just as well. And it might have done if it wasn't for the fact that, apart from everything about it being pretty much fine, they went and said, how can we make this look absolutely creepy as hell? And somebody went, have you ever thought of having what we're going to call a gummy sweet and making a monstrous human face out of it and putting it on the Transformer? And they went, yeah, that'll give the kids nightmares. I'm glad I never saw the box art for this. I would have been having nightmares. What the hell is going on with that head? If that head wasn't on this, it'd be absolutely fine. But that head is on this. And that is not a Transformer's head. That is a mutant, weird, freaky nightmare head. And that has got to go into Uncanny Valley without a shadow of a doubt. Swindle. So this was a Jeep in the Combaticons, and I always thought this was kind of a cool character. And it's fine here. It's kind of boring. It's very boxy, very uninteresting for that reason. It's absolutely fine. I guess it's They Tried without a shadow of a doubt, but I think it belongs at the bottom of They Tried. So that's where it's going. Tailgate. Now, I hated the picture of Windcharger, so you'd think this is a shoe-in for me to hate it. And I don't. I don't hate this. I actually think they've solved the problem with the hands, which looked really weird, and the pose, and everything else about the picture of Windcharger. And this isn't bad at all. I think that the head is the only issue I've got. And again, it's too squat and too wide. Perhaps if they just brought the head in a little bit and it was thinner, that would be fine. Or maybe if they made it a little bit taller, but then it might be too big. But I don't hate this. I don't hate this at all. I don't think it's... Is this good enough to go into almost there? But I don't know if this brings enough coolness factor to me like Outback and Pipes did. But I do like it. And so I think it goes into They Tried, but I think it can go fairly high in They Tried. So, well done, Tailgate. Tantrum. I'm not digging this one so much. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with it. I just don't like the pose. I'm not too keen on the face. Yeah, there's not a lot to like here, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. I think it has to go into They Tried because there isn't a problem here, but it's not giving me any good vibes. So I think it just goes to the very bottom of They Tried. Triptychon, the Decepticon city, the Decepticon Colossus. And like Metroplex, it fails pretty much full stop. I know this is kind of what the toy did look like, but again, sometimes you need to make sure it doesn't look like the toy. Q, see Galvatron. And this they've tried too much to make it look like the toy. And instead what it actually looks like is a complete rip-off of Zoidzilla from Zoids. And a bad one at that. It doesn't look towering, it doesn't look colossal. I quite like the fact they've incorporated the car on the front, that's quite nice, but there's not a lot to like about this. I don't think it's a good picture, it's certainly not uncanny. I guess it does the proportions maybe a bit better than Metroplex, so maybe it doesn't go into uncanny. Does it go into meh, or does it go into ass? I think it doesn't offend me enough to go into ass, so it's going to go into meh. I think it's better than Silverbolt, so yeah. Ultra Magnus, what we all thought was the replacement for Optimus Prime, and probably a bunch of us were fairly happy with that. And then they subverted our expectations and gave us Rodimus. And that was a sin in and of itself. However, so is this picture. This is just awful. This does not look like the cool new hero of the Autobots. This looks like a very podgy-faced old person, possibly constipated or possibly holding in a fart, or potentially doing some kind of dance. Either way, this is not a good version of Ultra Magnus, and it does him so dirty it's unpleasant to see. I am going to put this into ass and bad. Is it worse than Rodimus? Yeah, I think it is. Vortex, the last of the Combaticons. And I like this picture a heck of a lot. This is cool. Yeah, there's a little problem with the arm being stunted on one side. I don't know what it is. They go, one arm, you can have an elbow. The other arm, you cannot have an elbow. And how his hand is on the lead hand in the front foreground is a bit odd. But I like this picture. I don't care. I like it. It looks really cool. It doesn't hurt that he's got a bit of a Soundwave head going on there. And he turns into a helicopter. Badass. I like this. And this definitely goes into almost there. But it can't quite hit badass. Wheelie. Well, if you knew anything about Transformers, you knew this was coming. I've used Nightmare Fuel a bit too much, maybe. But if anything, this is Nightmare Refuel. This is awful. But that said, I'm going to give the designer, drawer of this one thing. That is exactly what the toy looked like. And if they'd have drawn what the character looked like in the movie, it would have been false advertising. This horrible creature is exactly what the toy looked like. And the same friend that had Outback, etc., had this. And this toy was a joke. As in, we found it was funny. It was like, what is this even meant to be? And so, of course, this is uncanny, freaky weirdness. And it's so weird that it has to go into Uncanny Valley. It's so frightening. But you know what? Because it is based on the toy, I don't think this is as frightening as Swerve. I think this does actually get one place higher than that. Wild Rider. Now, if you were to believe they drew these in alphabetical order, then they obviously got more bored as time went on, because this is easily the worst picture of them I think I've seen. This just looks like somebody who's bored, slightly annoyed, kind of walking forward a bit, kind of showing his gun. Is it worse than Breakdown? Yeah, it is. I think Breakdown's better than this, but it's nowhere near in the same league as the other ones. But is it better than Motormaster? Yeah, anything's better than Motormaster. Well, Scourge. So yeah, Wild Rider here, you definitely go into this pool. And I think, yeah, there. Retgar. So I'm going to finish on a character that means a lot to me, and yet a toy that I didn't want. The most reason this means a lot to me is it was the last Transformer I was ever bought by my parents. After this, I kind of faded away from my interest in Transformers. So I never got any more Transformers toys, never really asked for them. And if I'm honest, it was a downer initially, because they could have got me any Transformer, and they got me this. And they obviously thought, oh, this is cool and new and so on and so forth. But, you know, you could have got me Prowl or Sideswipe or whatever. No, you got me this. And I was not a downer because it was still a Transformer. It's still kind of cool. But it wasn't what I was really after. And then I played with it and I liked it. And I thought, actually, yeah, I like this. This is a pretty good toy. I mean, it had the other problem of it being a motorbike and it was the wrong size, but whatever. Then I had to watch the movie and get even more a bit depressed, for want of a better word, because the character of Retgar was just tat. Because he had exactly the same issue that I hated about the Bay movies Bumblebee. The talks in stupid ways, like, you know, clips of movies and all that kind of thing. I literally despise that. I think it is one of the worst things in anything. And so that put me off him. But then I realised that I hated the movie enough to not care and just went, I'll make them whatever I want to. And so I actually made him a more cool Transformer in my head when I played with him. So I grew to love him. I have the Studio Series version of him. He stands quite proudly on my shelf, but because now I've got all those Transformers I never had as a kid, he kind of goes a bit into obscurity. But he has a soft spot in my heart. So is this a good picture? Yeah, it is actually. It's a really good picture. I can see one thing I don't like about this that isn't enough, I don't think, to put me off him, but it's missing. And that is his moustache. I mean, he's kind of got the beard, I can see it a little bit, but the moustache is missing. And that's a shame because it was very characterful. But if I'm honest, beyond that, I really like this picture. And is it badass? Well, bias puts him in badass, I think. At the bottom, but bias puts him in badass. So there we have it. We have finished our rankings of the 1986 Transformers. And I'm pretty happy with where everything ended up, I think. I don't really want to move much about. I think where everything is fine. Normally I'll do a little bit of a shift about at the end, but just glancing at them, yeah, I'm sort of okay with that. Uncanny Valley is definitely split between the Uncanny Valley you can see first and just the meh one starts at Triptychon. So there's only 4 that I just thought were just not that interesting at all. All the rest were just weird. And there's a lot in Ass and Bad. I genuinely, overridingly feel this wasn't a better selection of images from the previous years. I think a lot was wrong here, and it almost felt like the artist was getting bored, or potentially artists. I don't know if it was all done by one guy or different guys. And some of them you can see they've really tried to go to the stick with the toy, and other times they've gone with artistic license and it's looked a lot better. So I don't know why they didn't do that more often, because it was what people did. I mean, look at computer games. They never look like the front cover. Anyway, this is my thoughts on it. You will have different thoughts. Please do share them with me in the comments. Always happy to hear from you guys. But whether I do another one of these tier lists, I don't know. My love kind of lies with 84 through to 86. But I'm happy to do 1987 onwards if you guys want to see another tier list and hear some more thoughts on it and see a bit more nostalgia. Other than that, if you like the video, please do drop a like, and subscribing always helps the channel. But until then, I'm glad you enjoyed this. And as always, until next time, GamerbugUK out.